Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere even wilder than your aunt's third wedding and twice as scandalous. Paris, in the 1920s, where the croissants were fresh, the jazz was hot, and, surprise, everyone was accidentally addicted to heroin. Yes, you heard that right. Tonight, we're tiptoeing through the absinthe-soaked boulevards and smoke-filled salons of the City of Light at the very moment it discovered both its soul and its total lack of self-control. This is a story about glamorous disaster, medical malpractice, and the kind of creative decisions that can only be made by people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. But before you slip into your silk pajamas, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy these weird little trips through history with me. Leave a comment telling me what you'd order at a Parisian cafe. Coffee, champagne, or something best described as probably illegal in most countries. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that cool white noise, get comfortable, and maybe put your phone just out of reach so you can't impulsively book a flight to Paris in the morning. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to wander through Paris in the 1920s, high on more than just life? Was it all Picasso, existential dread, and berets? Or did people really walk around with syringes in their handbags like they were just another accessory? How did heroin become the unofficial sponsor of creative genius and, let's be honest, some deeply questionable art? Could you survive a night at the Moulin Rouge without accidentally inventing surrealism? Or would you end up debating philosophy with a jazz saxophonist and a goose named Marcel? What did people actually do for fun before Netflix, Uber Eats, and group chats? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in Paris, 1926. The Eiffel Tower's already been built, jazz is blasting from every doorway, and your doctor has just prescribed you a medicine that is, technically speaking, more heroin than water. Good luck. It's the roaring 20s, and you've wandered into a Parisian pharmacy. Shelves gleam with glass vials, some labeled heroin, for coughs, nerves, and melancholy. The pharmacist, sporting a mustache as impressive as his disregard for patient safety, hands you a bottle and recommends you take it whenever you feel too normal. Welcome to the city where your medicine cabinet is basically a crime scene. Let's set the scene. The pharmacy is a dazzling labyrinth of colored bottles, powder tins, and old wooden drawers that probably haven't been dusted since Napoleon. The floor tiles are checkerboard, the lights too bright, and the faint scent of lavender does little to mask the unmistakable undertone of experimental chemistry. People shuffle in with everything from sniffles to heartbreak, clutching prescriptions written in a doctor's handwriting so indecipherable it might be a cryptic poem or a threat. No one seems alarmed that the same bottle is recommended for both a chest cold and a failed romance. You approach the counter and are immediately confronted by a pharmacist who is equal parts scientist and enthusiastic gambler. He doesn't ask what's wrong, he just sizes you up, taps his pencil on the glass, and pulls out a dazzling blue bottle. For nerves, ambition, and small dogs with existential dread, he says, sliding it across the counter like it's a winning hand in poker. If you ask about side effects, he simply shrugs and gestures to a faded poster of a jazz singer who claims, in giant letters, that she's never felt better. She's also holding a trumpet and possibly floating. The product lineup is a miracle of modern science, or at least modern optimism. Heroin for coughs, morphine for nerves, cocaine lozenges for a lively morning, and laudanum drops for those evenings when the absinthe just isn't cutting it. There are syrups for children, with a warning, not suitable for children under 2 unless extremely fussy. Balms for men with manly melancholy, and powders for the sort of headaches that only seem to affect philosophers and failed poets. Every prescription is an adventure. The city is buzzing with medical innovation, and a complete lack of regulation. If you catch a cold, you'll leave with enough narcotics to take down a small circus. If you're simply tired or uninspired, the pharmacist might recommend something so strong that you'll write poetry for 2 days and then sleep through the rest of the week. No one questions the logic. The newspapers are filled with advertisements promising a cure for everything, except, perhaps, moderation. The waiting area is a parade of the city's greatest eccentrics. One woman in pearls is here for her monthly tonic. A jazz pianist slouches in the corner, humming to himself and clutching a bottle of energy elixir that glows faintly in the dark. An American tourist, wide-eyed and already regretting the menu at last night's cafe, tries to translate a prescription with the help of a stray cat and a dictionary from 1894. No one is in a hurry. The real medicine here is the sense of possibility, chaos, and the lingering hope that maybe this time the tonic will fix everything. You leave the pharmacy with a bag clinking like wind chimes, a receipt as long as a novella, and a growing suspicion that Paris is the only city on earth where your entire medical history can be summed up with prescribed vibes. At home, your medicine cabinet is a dazzling museum of solutions to problems you haven't even invented yet. And when friends ask how you're feeling, you just smile, shrug, and say, perfectly Parisian. Because here, in the City of Light, a little chaos is the best prescription of all. Let's talk about how heroin, yes, that heroin, went from a lab experiment to the hottest remedy in town. It's not just for coughs, it's for everything. Migraines, heartbreak, existential dread, and that weird pain in your leg you got from dancing the Charleston too aggressively. Because nothing says modern medicine like giving everyone a highly addictive narcotic and wishing them bon chance. Set the scene. It's 1924, and you're living in an age that still believes science is what happens when you add a beaker to anything. The Parisian medical establishment, always on the hunt for the next miracle, is positively giddy about heroin. Developed just a few decades earlier by German chemists, who, in hindsight, should have stuck to beer, heroin is the shiny, new alternative to morphine. Less addictive, the advertisements claim, because in the 1920s, the only thing more powerful than science is optimism with a good moustache. Doctors are prescribing heroin for everything under the sun. A cough that won't quit. A headache that sounds suspiciously like a hangover. Nerves frazzled by jazz. And the kind of romantic melancholy that can only be cured by something stronger than poetry. No one questions the wisdom of their local physician, who's likely balancing his own prescription tucked away in his waistcoat. And why not? The stuff works. 2 drops, and suddenly your chest doesn't hurt, your spirit lifts, and the existential dread that usually looms after midnight decides to take the night off. Pharmacies market heroin with the same gusto as perfume. Advertisements paint it as the gentle cure for sensitive souls. There's a charming poster on every corner. A woman smiling serenely at her children. A bottle of heroin on the kitchen shelf. The tagline, "For what ails you, and your family too." Even children's cough syrups are spiked with a little magic. After all, what's a mild narcotic when bedtime peace is on the line? Of course, the city's cafe culture embraces the trend. Society matrons swirl a few drops into their afternoon coffee. Poets and painters keep bottles in their satchels, claiming it opens the mind. Jazz musicians are rumored to tip their trumpet valves with a dash of the stuff, which explains why some solos last for 30 minutes and end with someone declaring love for a street lamp. But it's not just the artists. The great and the ordinary alike are hooked. Heroin becomes the universal solution, a ticket to good vibes only. Your landlord recommends it for rent anxiety. The baker says it cures that sinking feeling after eating too many croissants. Your neighbor's poodle is sleeping better than ever, and frankly, You'd love to know what the pharmacist is putting in the biscuits. Naturally, there are side effects, but in 1920s Paris, side effects are a vibe. The city is buzzing, slightly dazed, and nobody is in a rush. Everyone seems just a little more relaxed, a little more philosophical, and a lot less likely to remember where they put their keys. You start to wonder if you're sick or just out of fashion. The truth is, the age of good vibes only is intoxicating, literally. Paris glows with the light of discovery and a hint of chemically enhanced optimism. The music is faster, the parties last longer, and every bad mood can be banished with a visit to the pharmacy. Who needs therapy when you have a bottle that fits in your pocket and a doctor who winks as he hands it over? And so, in the roaring 20s, heroin wasn't just a drug. It was the Parisian mood itself, effervescent, impulsive, and blissfully unaware of what tomorrow would bring. Good luck indeed. Pull up a wobbly cafe chair next to a poet, a painter, and a woman in a hat bigger than your rent. Everyone's sipping espresso, chain smoking, and gently floating off their stools. You're here for the conversation, the ambience, and, let's be honest, the chance to see if someone's going to start hallucinating about the wallpaper. Parisian cafe culture has never been this elevated. Let's set the scene. You've just stepped into Les Deux Magots, or maybe Le Dôme, the kind of cafe where the air is half coffee, half cologne, and entirely smoke. The floor is a mosaic of cigarette burns, wine stains, and dropped manifestos. There's an endless row of round tables, each with just enough room for an espresso, a glass of something a little stronger, and a stack of unsent letters about your feelings. A jazz band is warming up in the corner, the saxophone player already swaying with a confidence that suggests he started his day with medicine. You squeeze into a seat. Immediately, you're surrounded by characters. A poet reciting verses to a glass of absinthe, an artist doodling on napkins and occasionally on fellow patrons, a woman in feathers explaining the symbolic importance of her new shoes, and an American writer trying to pass off homesickness as continental ennui. Every conversation begins with, "What is art?" and ends with, "Why is this table spinning? Is it the ideas or the cough syrup?" You don't know, and it's rude to ask. The menu offers black coffee strong enough to make your teeth vibrate, baguettes you could use for self-defense, and a mysterious house blend that the waiter promises will open your mind or close your afternoon. Most importantly, the pharmacy down the street has recently started offering delivery service, and the daily special comes with a complimentary vial of creative tonic. Some call it inspiration. Others call it heroin with a label that says "Bonne journée." Here, the act of sitting is a political statement. You are declaring to the world, "I have nothing to do, and I'm doing it spectacularly." Every table is a symposium, every argument is a potential literary movement, and every yawn is blamed on modern fatigue. You find yourself arguing with a stranger about the soul of Paris. Is it the music? The food? The ability to nap at any hour without judgment? Your opponent waves her cigarette, shrugs, and suggests it's the city's tolerance for the art of slow collapse. And then, as the afternoon fades, reality softens. Someone brings out a deck of tarot cards. Another group erupts in laughter over a joke that doesn't have a punchline. The woman in the hat starts humming along with the jazz, and you realize that your own coffee has gone cold, and you're not entirely sure if you finished it. Maybe you're on your second cup. Maybe the cup finished you. In Parisian cafe culture, everyone is a little bit elevated above their worries, their deadlines, their sense of time. The cafe is a refuge, a theater, a halfway house for the creatively afflicted. Outside, the city bustles. But here inside, everything slows down. except the conversation, which never stops, never quite makes sense, and always feels like the most important thing you'll hear all week. By the time dusk settles, you've traded philosophies, half a pack of cigarettes, and possibly your last good idea for another hour of gentle drifting. You stand, a little unsteady, hat askew, and wander out into the Paris night. The world outside seems sharper, but you feel softer, as if you've spent an entire afternoon floating 3 inches above the ground. That's cafe culture on cloud 9. Part conversation, part chemical, part daydream, and all Paris. Welcome to the smoky studios of Montparnasse, where art isn't just made, it's felt at a molecular level. Your new best friends are painters who haven't slept in days, sculptors who mistake you for a muse, and at least one novelist who's convinced his typewriter is plotting against him. Heroin isn't just part of the scene. It is the scene. Let's set the stage. It's nearly midnight, and you're in a garret apartment where the walls are the color of cigarette ash and the floors have never met a mop. The only thing fresher than the air is the existential dread wafting in from the stairwell. Everyone you meet is here for 2 reasons: to change the world, and to have a really good excuse for missing breakfast tomorrow. The artists are everywhere, and none of them are wearing shoes. Picasso is in the corner, furiously sketching a rooster that might also be a horse. A woman with kohl-rimmed eyes is reading poetry to a lamp, while André Breton holds court with a bottle of something that fizzes and a manifesto about the subconscious. Someone just tried to pay for a painting with a baguette. Nobody seems to mind. In Paris, surrealism isn't just a movement, it's a diagnosis. You join the group, clutching a teacup filled with philosopher's cordial, which is roughly 90% alcohol, 8% heroin, and 2% ground-up café receipts. It goes down smoother than expected. Around you, conversations blend into debates about dreams, destiny, and whether or not the cat is telepathic. There are frequent, dramatic silences. Someone claims to have painted the wind, someone else claims to have married it. No one blinks. Creativity, here, is a full-contact sport. You watch as a sculptor covers a bicycle in feathers and declares it the triumph of flightless ambition. A playwright composes a 3-act tragedy entirely in mime. There are rumors of a secret society dedicated to painting the invisible, but you're not sure if it's real or just something everyone pretends to understand. Someone passes you a piece of paper. Is it a sketch, a shopping list, or the next great work of modern art? No one can tell, least of all the artist. And then there's the heroin, everywhere, quietly sanctioned, gently encouraged, and as easy to find as a brush or a bottle of ink. Artists claim it opens the doors of perception, though sometimes it just opens the window so the ghosts can get in. Your host offers you a taste of inspiration, and for a moment, the room spins like a Dali painting. The boundaries between genius and chaos dissolve. If you feel a little light-headed, that's not the fumes. That's the spirit of the age. But behind the creative whirlwind, there's an undercurrent of exhaustion. Mornings come late, if at all, and most projects are abandoned halfway for a new idea that seems, at 3 in the morning, absolutely world-changing. The next day, nobody remembers quite what happened. Paintings hang upside down. Unfinished manuscripts pile up in drawers. And the real masterpieces are the stories no one can prove ever existed. Still, it works. This fevered, frantic, often sleep-deprived community transforms Paris into the world capital of weirdness and wonder. Surrealism is born, not from clarity, but from confusion, moments when dreams and reality collapse into each other like drunks at a costume ball. The city cheers them on. Critics sneer. Parents despair. But the art world holds its breath, waiting to see what impossible thing will be created next. So you stumble out into the night, pockets filled with sketches and surreal ambitions, knowing you've witnessed the birth of something strange and wonderful. In 1920s Paris, artists don't just break the rules, they forget what the rules were for in the first place. And somewhere, in a smoky studio, the next great movement is already waking up, probably around noon. Getting dressed in 1920s Paris means more than picking a tie or feather boa. You also need to decide: flask or syringe? Accessories include pearls, tiny hats, and little glass vials stashed in clutch purses. The hottest designers in town? Pharmacies. Let's set the scene. It's the golden hour before another Parisian soirée, and your boudoir looks like a hurricane hit a silk factory. Clothes are everywhere. Flapper dresses dripping with sequins, suits with lapels wide enough to serve tea on, stockings in colors that would scandalize your grandmother. And then, amongst the tangle of perfume bottles and powder compacts, there it is. Your personal pick-me-up right next to the pearl necklace and the lipstick you may or may not have borrowed from Josephine Baker. In the 1920s, Parisian fashion is about making a statement, a loud one if possible. Everyone is competing for the title of most daring, and the rules are as flexible as a jazz improvisation. Men are swapping top hats for berets. Women are cutting their hair into bobs so sharp they could slice a croissant. Nobody cares if you're mixing stripes with polka dots, as long as you do it with enough confidence and maybe a shot of something medicinal before you leave the house. But here's the twist. While everyone else is wondering whether this season's color is lavender or midnight blue, you're busy hiding a tiny glass vial of heroin in your evening bag. Why? Because a splash of Chanel No. 5 is lovely, but a discreet dose of soothing solution is considered the real secret weapon. The society pages gossip about who's wearing what, but they're just as interested in who's borrowing the doctor's pen to write their own prescriptions. The line between accessory and contraband is thinner than a garter strap, and the pharmacies are keeping up with demand. Some have started offering couture packaging, dainty bottles with gilded labels, velvet pouches to match your handbag, even monogrammed syringes if you're feeling especially chic and reckless. The result? Paris is the only city in the world where a doctor's script can double as a fashion statement, and mixing cocktails might mean combining laudanum with a twist of lemon. The pre-party ritual is an event in itself. You and your friends gather around a vanity, passing around hairpins, powder puffs, and discreet doses of tonique. You debate whether to go for the bold lip or the subtle smoky eye. But in the end, everyone agrees the best look is slightly mysterious and possibly medicated. A final spritz of perfume, a quick check for runs in your stockings, and, just in case, a flask of cognac for emergencies or breakfast. Once you hit the dance floor, fashion is more than just clothes. It's choreography. Pearls swing, fringes swirl, silk stockings flash, and every movement screams modernity. If you see someone disappear behind a velvet curtain, it's anyone's guess whether they're fixing their lipstick or their prescription. Nobody blinks. It's Paris, darling. Even the city's most iconic designers are in on the act. The new trend? Dresses with hidden pockets for your evening supplement. Some ateliers have begun offering secret compartments in handbags, jewelry that unscrews to reveal a pinch of powdered nerve tonic, and, for the truly avant-garde, hats lined with tiny bottles that rattle charmingly with every turn of the head. By sunrise, your shoes hurt, your pearls are tangled, and your purse is mysteriously lighter. You can't remember half the people you met, but you do recall that your dress was the talk of the party and possibly the police, because in 1920s Paris, fashion isn't just about looking good. It's about surviving the night, one silk sash and secret stash at a time. It's time for your appointment. The doctor is brisk, stylish, and recommends heroin for just about anything. Nerves, fatigue, the flu, or your neighbor's loud dog. The checkup is brief, the prescription long, and you leave with a pep in your step, and the creeping suspicion that medical school was mostly optional. Set the scene, you're in the waiting room of a fashionable Parisian clinic, nervously flipping through magazines printed before the war, and trying to ignore the fact that the wallpaper appears to be slowly sliding down the wall. The receptionist, an unsmiling woman with lipstick as sharp as her side eye, offers you a seat next to a poet clutching a prescription for melancholy, a jazz singer seeking vocal relief, and a poodle who may or may not be there for restless tail syndrome. Nobody looks well, but everyone looks stylish. Your name is called. You're ushered into the doctor's office, which is part laboratory, part art studio, and part what can only be described as mysterious, velvet storage closet. The doctor himself is a marvel, perfectly tailored suit, monocle glinting, moustache waxed to the point of weaponization. He greets you with the warmth of a man who just remembered his own mortgage. "What seems to be the trouble?" he asks. Already reaching for his pad, you hesitate. "Trouble sleeping," you say. "Bit of a cough, maybe some nerves. Also, my neighbor's dog won't stop barking." He nods with grave understanding, makes a few elaborate notes that might just be doodles, and then, "Ah, yes, he has just the thing. This will fix you right up," he declares, reaching for a bottle so elaborately labeled you're not sure if it's medicine or a perfume. His solution? Heroin, laudanum, or one of those tonics Paris has become famous for. Maybe all three. The instructions are always the same. Take as needed. Double the dose if you see your ex at the opera. If you dare to ask about side effects, he leans in conspiratorially and assures you that nothing is truly dangerous unless it's in English. You want to believe him. After all, he's got diplomas framed on the wall, one of which, if you squint, seems to be for competitive rowing. As you leave, the waiting room has only grown livelier. A novelist is debating the relative merits of tinctures versus inhalants, with a woman dressed as a fortune teller. A group of American tourists are waving their new prescriptions like boarding passes. The poodle is asleep, snoring blissfully. There's a palpable sense of hope in the air, and also a faint chemical haze. Back on the boulevards, your new prescription becomes a sort of social currency. "Who's your doctor?" people ask, as if inquiring about your tailor or your favorite jazz club. At parties, the contents of your medicine cabinet are discussed with the same reverence as the latest Picasso. "He put you on that." "How modern. My doctor swears by something he gets from Belgium, but you can't travel with it unless you bribe the conductor." The end result? You feel better, or, at the very least, you feel different, which is practically the same thing. Your nerves are steadied, your cough disappears, and you're suddenly less concerned about the neighbor's dog, the state of the world, or the fact that you forgot to eat lunch again. The world seems softer, the music brighter, and you walk with a little more spring in your step, possibly from the medicine, possibly from the new shoes you bought while forgetting what day it was. Paris in the 1920s is a city that prescribes first and asks questions later. Doctors are equal parts chemist, confessor, and magician, turning everyday complaints into little bottles of possibility. And if you ever wonder if this is all a little too good to be true, well, there's always another prescription waiting for you next week. The night starts with a live jazz quartet, copious champagne, and philosophical debates about whether life means anything. By 2 a.m., someone's reciting poetry to a potted plant, and you're trying to remember if you already told everyone you're actually American. Welcome to a party where the guest list is everyone who should probably be in rehab. Let's set the scene. It's Saturday night on the right bank. and you're heading up 5 flights of stairs to an apartment that smells like fresh bread, cigar smoke, and the faint but persistent aroma of creative solutions from the local pharmacy. The hostess greets you in a sequined dress and a feathered headband, clutching a cocktail that's half gin, half mystery, and entirely Parisian. The hallway is a parade of questionable fashion decisions. Velvet jackets, silk pajamas, beaded shawls, and at least one person in their bathrobe who claims it's the new couture. You step into the main room and are instantly swept into a swirl of music and voices. The jazz band is wedged into a corner, improvising with a wild energy that suggests someone slipped something extra into the trumpet player's flask. The crowd is an unpredictable mix of artists, poets, exiled royalty, and bohemian dreamers, all united by a passion for dancing, debating, and avoiding tomorrow at all costs. The music is loud, the laughter louder. Glasses clink, feet stomp, and the parquet floor shakes with the rhythm of a city that refuses to sleep. Between sets, someone drags out a chessboard. Another person starts sketching everyone in charcoal on the back of unpaid bills. And 2 Americans argue about whether Paris is liberating or just enabling everyone's worst ideas. No one wins the argument, but everyone agrees that more champagne is required. As midnight slides into the wee hours, the conversation deepens and the jazz turns slow and sultry. The party's pulse shifts from gleeful to philosophical. Somebody quotes Nietzsche, somebody else asks, "Who?" And suddenly you're in a half-circle of people earnestly discussing the meaning of existence. Are we here for love? For art? For the excellent hors d'oeuvre? The potted plant in the corner seems to have an opinion. At least, that's what the surrealist is claiming. You find yourself drifting from group to group. In the kitchen, a novelist is holding court over a pot of special tea with an audience that includes 2 dancers and a stray cat who may or may not have its own invitation. In the bathroom line, you discuss the finer points of jazz syncopation with a man who swears he once played saxophone for Josephine Baker, before things got complicated. The window is wide open, and the city outside sparkles, as if winking at your life choices. At some point, you lose track of the time, your shoes, and possibly your name. Someone plays a record backwards and claims it's avant-garde. Someone else falls in love, twice, and leaves with a note written on a cocktail napkin. You promise to write a novel with a painter who spells existentialism differently every time. The party becomes a blur of laughter, music, and ideas. Some brilliant, some best left in the kitchen with the gin. And when the sun finally rises, the apartment looks like a museum of forgotten ambition. Empty bottles, crumpled poems, and an armchair that somehow ended up on the balcony. You say your goodbyes to the survivors, half asleep, mascara smudged, and still arguing about the nature of happiness. As you step into the cool morning air, you realize you haven't found any answers, but you've definitely made some memories. Or at least, you think you have. That's a Paris party. Starts with jazz, ends with existentialism, and leaves you just philosophical enough to forget your hangover until the next night. You're hanging out with Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and a stray cat who may or may not be Jean Cocteau. Everyone's looking for inspiration, meaning, or just their missing hat. The only thing everyone can agree on: the Parisian pharmacy is the real MVP. Let's set the scene. It's a grey afternoon on the left bank, and you're tucked into a cafe that smells like burnt coffee, damp wool, and literary ambition. The table is stacked with empty cups, half-filled notebooks, and at least 3 prescriptions scrawled in such atrocious handwriting you suspect the doctor was testing a new form of hieroglyphics. All around you, the exiles and dreamers of the lost generation are nursing their hangovers and their hopes, their minds set on greatness, or at least on surviving until dinner. The conversation, as always, is a chaotic blend of brilliance, self-doubt, and medical updates. Hemingway grunts something about courage and pain, tapping his empty glass with a look that says he'd rather wrestle a bull than talk about his feelings. Fitzgerald is convinced he's on the verge of a literary breakthrough as soon as he gets his hands on a stronger cough syrup. The cat has commandeered a bar stool, eyes half closed in the manner of all true Parisian philosophers, and seems unbothered by the existential crises erupting around him. And then there's the pharmacy, that hallowed ground where every lost soul in Paris eventually winds up. It's not just a shop, it's a confessional, a supplier, and occasionally a place to nap if you've been up for 3 days straight debating the meaning of modernity. The pharmacist knows you by name, by ailment, and by literary output. Something for the nerves, he asks, already reaching for a bottle that's half medicine, half inspiration. You hand over your prescription, real, forged, or simply a note reading "please help," and walk out with a paper bag full of possibility. Nothing is off limits. There's heroin for melancholy, laudanum for writer's block, and a tonic so potent the jazz musicians use it as a metronome. The pharmacy is the equalizer. Here, everyone is just another patient with an unpronounceable problem. American writers, Russian émigrés, French poets, even the cafe waiters, all standing in line, trying to look casual while debating whether to ask for the usual or risk something new. Occasionally, someone walks out looking twice as inspired, or just twice as likely to nap at the next table. Back at the cafe, everyone compares notes. "My pharmacist says this will help me finish my novel," Fitzgerald whispers, clutching a tiny bottle like it's the Holy Grail. "Mine says this will help me forget I started one," Hemingway replies. Someone passes around a tiny tin of Parisian courage, which, from the taste, is mostly alcohol and something probably illegal. It's a badge of honor to have a preferred pharmacy, a trusted chemist, a remedy that keeps the midnight oil burning. The real genius, though, is what happens after the first dose. Words flow, ideas spark, and suddenly the room is alive with poetry, plans, and the possibility that yes, you really will write the next great novel, if only you can remember where you left your pen. Even the cat starts purring with creative energy. For a few golden hours, everyone feels almost invincible until the sugar crash, the return of existential dread, or the next bill from the pharmacist. But for now, the lost generation is found. United not just by dreams, but by the humble pharmacy, the real heart of Parisian creativity. Here, inspiration comes by the bottle, writer's block is a curable condition, and nobody ever worries about running out of ideas, only running out of prescriptions. And if you wake up tomorrow with nothing but a headache, an empty bottle, and a cafe tab that could fund an opera, just remember, you're in Paris, you're a writer, and the pharmacy opens at 9. Let's talk about music. The jazz clubs of Pigalle are pulsing with energy. Saxophones scream into the smoky night, and your own feet won't stop moving. Is it the rhythm, the excitement, or the tiny white pill you found in your coat pocket? Either way, the only thing faster than the tempo is your heartbeat. Set the scene. It's midnight in Paris, and you're wedged into a tiny club that feels like it was assembled from spare parts, mismatched chairs, and dreams. The walls are lined with velvet curtains and stained with decades of cigarette smoke, as if the club itself is permanently exhaling. The band takes the stage, a whirlwind of brass and bravado, and the crowd roars with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for winning the lottery or seeing your ex trip over a cobblestone. Tonight, you're not just a spectator, you're a participant in the great Parisian experiment of how little sleep a human can survive on. The jazz band launches into a number so fast and complicated that you suspect they're being paid by the note. The clarinet player is already sweating. The drummer has the manic look of a man who's seen eternity and found it full of syncopation, and the pianist is playing with both hands, one foot, and a glass of something fizzy balanced on the keys. The room pulses with rhythm and reckless optimism. All around you, couples twirl with wild abandon, cigarette holders waving like conductors' batons. You dance with strangers, lose your hat, find someone else's, and nearly sprain an ankle attempting a Charleston you learned 5 minutes ago, and will absolutely regret in the morning. Is it jazz? Is it adrenaline? Or is it the special supplement that the bartender slipped into your drink as a welcome gift? In Paris, you never really know, and you're not sure you want to. But let's not kid ourselves. No one is really here for moderation. Everyone in the room is wired, tired, and 3 drinks past sensible. You're fairly certain that at least half the club is riding on the same wave of pep pills, nerve tonics, and whatever the local doctor can be bribed to prescribe. The line between exhilaration and existential crisis is razor thin, but tonight, you're skating right down the middle. As the night spirals on, the club becomes a microcosm of Parisian chaos and invention. Over at the bar, 2 writers argue about jazz's meaning while finishing each other's sentences and cocktails. At a corner table, a surrealist painter sketches the band, except he's only drawing their shadows. The owner of the club is either asleep or composing the next big musical craze on the back of a napkin. The bartender pours another round of something blue and highly questionable, winks and says, "For courage." And then, in a moment of exhausted clarity, you realize why everyone keeps coming back. Jazz is more than music. It's the city's heartbeat, the soundtrack of nights that never end, of endless possibility, of the delicious, jittery feeling that something extraordinary could happen at any moment. Or, at the very least, you'll meet someone who claims to have invented the saxophone. By 4 a.m., you're done, exhilarated, electrified, and probably vibrating at a higher frequency than when you walked in. The band plays one last song, the crowd whoops, and you spill into the Parisian dawn, feet aching, head buzzing, and a half-remembered promise to learn the trumpet. As you wander home through quiet streets, you realize that the jazz age isn't just about the music or the medicine. It's about moving too fast to worry, too loudly to care, and finding joy in the madness of the night. Your heart's still racing, your shoes are in tatters, and you're already wondering when you'll do it all again. Because in 1920s Paris, the jazz never really stops, and neither do you. Paris is for lovers, until it isn't. Your beau leaves you for a surrealist sculptor, your best friend runs off with a jazz musician, and the only thing left is your trusty prescription. Letters are written, tears are shed, and the only reliable comfort comes in a bottle. Let's set the scene. You're sitting at a rain-streaked window in Montmartre, clutching a half-written letter and a handkerchief that's seen better days. The street below is alive with accordion music and the scent of fresh bread. But your heart is somewhere between yesterday's romance and this morning's hangover. You'd always believed Paris was a city for passionate declarations, spontaneous waltzes on the Seine, and dizzying evenings that ended with someone whispering poetry in the dark. Instead, you're nursing a heartbreak so dramatic it deserves its own tragic opera, and your only audience is a cat named Maurice who seems unimpressed by human suffering. The letter in your lap starts off eloquent, then turns into a list of grievances, then a confessional, then a menu of everything you wish you'd ordered for dinner instead of love. You consider mailing it, but the effort seems Herculean. The post office is 3 blocks away, and your motivation is somewhere at the bottom of your soothing tonic. Besides, Parisian heartbreak is a full-time job. Every cafe, every lamplit bridge, every shadowed doorway reminds you of your lost affair and, possibly, your last pair of good socks. Fortunately, this is Paris in the 20s, and you are not alone. Heartbreak is the city's unofficial pastime. The man at the bakery sighs so heavily over the pain au chocolat that you suspect he's mourning a pastry chef. The woman in the bookshop tells you with a tragic flourish that she's been writing the same love letter for 6 years and will probably die before she mails it. Even the statue in the park looks like it's contemplating sending a telegram to someone who doesn't care. You turn, as everyone does, to the pharmacy, a place where broken hearts and stubbed toes are treated with equal seriousness. The pharmacist, ever discreet, offers you a little blue bottle with a label that promises gentle relief for the soul. You're not sure if it's medicine or moonlight, but it works. Tears subside. Anxiety softens. And suddenly you can reread your lover's note without wanting to set it on fire. Heroin for heartbreak is the Parisian solution. Efficient, poetic, and just risky enough to feel a little bit romantic. Soon your letters change. Instead of sobbing declarations, you write dreamy, detached essays on the weather. Today, the rain fell softly, and so did my expectations. Your friends, equally afflicted, gather for tea and sympathy, swapping heartbreak stories and prescriptions. Someone recites a poem to their lost love. Someone else just drinks straight from the bottle. There's comfort in commiseration. Heartbreak is never lonely in Paris. It's practically a group activity. If you find yourself tempted to reconnect, the city has a built-in defense. Everywhere you turn, lovers are breaking up. Couples quarrel in art galleries. Someone sobs over a bottle of wine in the back of a taxi. A jazz singer croons about love gone wrong, while 3 people in the front row cry into their champagne. The city's collective heart beats, breaks, and bandages itself with a fresh prescription and another round of cigarettes. By midnight, you've torn up your letter, patched up your dignity, and decided to fall in love again, if only with a slice of cake and the view from your rooftop. Paris may be for lovers, but it's also for survivors. And if all else fails, you'll always have your pharmacist. Because in 1920s Paris, love comes and goes. But a well-written heartbreak and a well-stocked medicine cabinet lasts forever. You stroll through the streets in search of beauty, wisdom, and your sense of balance. The city is alive with poetry, music, and the faint scent of pharmaceutical misadventure. Everyone's a philosopher, a dreamer, or just slightly too relaxed for walking in a straight line. Set the scene. It's a pale blue morning on Boulevard Saint-Germain. You leave your apartment with no plan but plenty of time. Your hat is rakishly angled. Your shoes are already regretting the day ahead, and your pockets contain only a notebook, a pencil stub, and a suspiciously familiar prescription you can't recall ever filling. Welcome to Paris, where doing nothing is a civic duty and doing it beautifully is an Olympic sport. Being a flaneur isn't just about walking, it's about wandering. You stroll past corner cafés where writers in yesterday's clothes argue about the meaning of art over cups of black coffee and cold cigarette butts. You pause by a bookstall along the Seine, thumbing through novels you'll never finish, smiling at the dog-eared pages and the vendor who insists Baudelaire was overrated. Across the river, the towers of Notre Dame glow in the sun, which you swear is softer here, more forgiving. Your route is aimless and perfectly Parisian. Every corner holds a story, every alley a secret. You join a crowd of artists watching a man on stilts recite poetry to pigeons. You listen, enthralled, and wonder if he's famous or just late for an appointment at the pharmacy. A street vendor offers you roasted chestnuts, and you buy a paper cone, more for the warmth than the taste. Somewhere nearby, a jazz band is warming up, notes floating over the rooftops, mingling with the smell of fresh bread and the lingering trace of yesterday's absinthe. The world here moves at the speed of conversation. You stop in a tiny park, scribble something profound in your notebook, and immediately forget what it was. An old woman on a bench smiles knowingly. She's seen 100 flâneurs before you, most of them lost, all of them convinced they're about to discover the meaning of life in a baguette or a particularly evocative shadow. But the truth is, being a flâneur in 1920s Paris is as much about what you don't do. You avoid appointments, you sidestep obligations. You skip anything that feels remotely like work, preferring to chase inspiration, daydreams, and sometimes your own hat when the wind picks up. If your feet start to ache, you simply blame it on your poetic temperament and find a new café to collapse in, ordering coffee and a discreet dose of something for the nerves. By late afternoon, you've collected stories, snippets of overheard gossip, a few new blisters, and an existential appreciation for the fact that you can't feel your toes. But that's the price of Parisian glamour, style over comfort, poetry over practicality, and a willingness to get a little lost for the sake of an interesting afternoon. As the sun sets, you make your way home, heart full, notebook slightly less empty, shoes a size too tight. The city twinkles, the lamplighters work their magic, and you promise yourself you'll do it all again tomorrow, just as soon as you remember where you live. Because in Paris, being a flâneur isn't about arriving anywhere at all. It's about drifting, dreaming, and collecting moments so beautiful you forget your sore feet, and sometimes even your own name. Dinner parties are the backbone of Parisian social life, and tonight's menu features roast duck, expensive wine, and a dessert course that accidentally puts half the table to sleep. The chef claims it's the sauce. You're pretty sure it's the digestive. Let's set the scene. The invitation arrives on creamy paper, promising an evening of gastronomy and gentle adventure. You spend half the afternoon picking the right ensemble, something formal enough for candlelight, loose enough for breathing, and equipped with pockets big enough for the little blue bottle your pharmacist insists pairs well with cheese. You arrive to a room already humming with laughter, perfume, and the unmistakable whiff of ambition and medicinal optimism. The table is set with dazzling silverware, artfully mismatched wine glasses, and more forks than you have fingers. Your host, ever the modern Parisian, greets you with a knowing wink and a glass of champagne, fortified with a house tonic, which is to say, slightly suspicious. The guest list is a who's who of the city's most interesting misfits: poets, painters, a banker who claims to have met the Tsar, and at least 3 people who have definitely changed their names since last week. The first course arrives. A tiny salad of mysterious greens, drizzled with a vinaigrette so aromatic you wonder if it's legal in some countries. Conversation is lively, everyone eager to impress, and the jokes come as fast as the waiters can refill the bread basket. Your neighbor, a novelist with opinions on everything, tells you that he's recently discovered the true meaning of life at the bottom of a wine bottle and possibly a bottle of soothing elixir from the pharmacy. By the time the main course lands, roast duck with a sauce that glistens like new money, everyone is feeling wonderfully convivial. The host raises a toast to modernity, to madness, to the miracle of French medicine, and you notice a certain sparkle in everyone's eyes that can't be attributed to duck fat alone. The chef emerges, bows theatrically, and disappears to the kitchen where you're fairly certain he's preparing the digestive with more enthusiasm than restraint. After dinner, the lights dim, and the dessert arrives. A confection so delicate you're afraid to breathe near it. There's a dollop of cream, a dusting of chocolate, and something in the syrup that makes conversation slow to a dreamlike crawl. By the time you're halfway through, half the table is serenely silent, lost in thought, or softly humming the Marseillaise to themselves. The novelist has stopped arguing. The poet is doodling spirals on the tablecloth. someone is gently snoring into their napkin. But the party isn't over yet. The host wheels out a crystal decanter filled with an amber liquid. That is, according to him, for digestion, inspiration, and selective memory loss. Everyone raises a glass, toasts to Paris, and drinks deeply. You feel your worries melting away, your toes tingling, and the room taking on a soft golden glow, like the city itself has decided to turn down the volume for just a moment. By midnight, guests are stretched out on velvet couches, discussing the finer points of modern art, the absurdity of time, and whether the chef's sauce was meant to make you forget your last name. You're content, dreamy, and deeply grateful for Parisian hospitality. A place where every dinner party flirts with the line between cuisine and chemistry. Eventually, you drift home, certain of only two things. You've eaten well, and you'll need to reread your own notes to remember what was said. But that's the magic of a Parisian dinner party, where the food is sublime, the conversation is philosophical, and dessert might just be the best sleep aid in town. Bon appétit and bonne nuit. Behind every fashionable window there's a story. Housewives dosing their nerves, maids swiping a sip, and the family cat eyeing the medicine cabinet. Domestic bliss is 1 part affection, 2 parts pharmaceutical fog. Let's set the scene. It's a bright Parisian morning. Sunlight filters through lacy curtains onto a polished kitchen table where a breakfast spread waits. Coffee, croissants, and a small blue bottle discreetly nestled next to the sugar bowl. You are the lady of the house, part social coordinator, part emotional anchor, part amateur chemist. While the city bustles outside, your domain is a carefully orchestrated symphony of chores, whispered confidences, and the occasional restorative from the cupboard. Breakfast with the family is a gentle farce. The children fight over jam. Your husband reads the paper upside down. He'll never admit it. And the maid sets the table with an efficiency that suggests she, too, is running on something stronger than caffeine. You smile serenely, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and add a few drops of Nerves tonic, just enough to keep the morning's chaos charming rather than catastrophic. Domestic harmony in 1920s Paris is maintained by ritual, resourcefulness, and the secret knowledge that most problems can be solved, or at least postponed, with a little help from the pharmacy. Did the neighbor's rooster wake you before dawn? There's a tincture for that. Is your mother-in-law coming to lunch? Double the dose? Did the laundry woman gossip about your new hat? Take a powder, write it off, and add it to the list of things you're too calm to care about. As the day unfolds, so do the little dramas. The maid breaks a vase, and then, in a remarkable display of initiative, cleans up by borrowing a sip from the kitchen flask. You find her humming in the pantry, blissfully unconcerned about the fragments. The cat, ever curious, eyes the open cupboard with the practiced gaze of someone who knows where the good stuff is kept. You shoo him away, but not before he gives you a look of feline solidarity. A silent agreement that this household runs on secrets and sedatives. Afternoons are a parade of tasks and visitors. The butcher's boy arrives with a knowing grin, dropping off more than just sausages. Today, he has a tiny packet from the chemist for Madame. The neighbor pops in for coffee and lingers suspiciously long near the medicine shelf, eyeing your impressive collection of tonics. You share a cup, commiserate about husbands and bills, and trade the kind of gossip that would make even the local priest blush. By evening, you're a maestro of calm. Dinner is served, candles are lit, and everyone marvels at your unflappable mood. The secret, of course, is not just in the sauce. It's in the little glass bottle tucked discreetly next to the salt, and the knowledge that everyone in your circle is navigating their own day with similar support. Housewives exchange recipes and pharmacy recommendations with equal enthusiasm. Which tonic for nerves? Which powder for sleep? Which cordial for surviving Tuesday? After the family is tucked in and the last teacup washed, you settle in with your own private nightcap. A tiny sip of restorative and a sigh of relief. The city glows outside, the cat curls at your feet, and for a moment, everything is perfectly peaceful. Because in the secret lives of Parisian housewives, the greatest act of love is keeping the household running, no matter what. And if that requires a little help from Dr. Dupont's tonic of tranquility, well, who's counting? Here's to the unsung heroes of domestic Paris. Calm under pressure, clever under stress, and always ready with just the right dose of denial. What goes up must come down. Morning in Paris means pounding headaches, shaky hands, and strong black coffee. Everyone's swearing off the stuff for at least a few hours, until the next prescription comes through. Let's set the scene. It's dawn in Paris, and sunlight is leaking through your curtains like an accusation. Your head feels like someone tried to play the entire jazz age inside your skull. Your tongue is the texture of yesterday's baguette, and you have the lingering sense that you may or may not have promised to elope with a trumpet player from Montmartre. The room tilts, the city hums outside. You have become intimately familiar with the phrase, "too much of a good thing." Downstairs, the kitchen is a scene of quiet desperation. The only thing louder than the clatter of coffee cups is the collective groan of your housemates as they nurse their own regrets. You are not alone. Across Paris, half the population is in some stage of hangover, physical, emotional, or philosophical. Everyone is feeling the aftershock of last night's revelry. The city that never sleeps now wonders if it ever really wants to wake up again. The first remedy is ritual. Black coffee, bitter and thick enough to be considered soup. Someone swears by a glass of cold water with a squeeze of lemon. Another insists on a croissant so buttery it slides down without effort. You sip slowly, eyes closed, as your neighbor recounts the plot of a dream that may have involved Josephine Baker, a missing hat, and the phrase existential dread. No one asks questions. It's too early for answers, and anyway, everyone is busy making resolutions they have no intention of keeping. You resolve, privately, that you will never touch the stuff again, be it prescription, powder, or the mysterious tonic that was definitely not wine. You mean it too, as you always do. Clean living, you announce to the cat, who yawns in skepticism. Your friends join in. One vows to quit jazz clubs for a week, another swears off poetry and passionate arguments, and the bravest among you decides to abstain from anything blue and bottled until further notice. But Paris is a city with a short memory and an even shorter attention span for self-denial. By noon, the symptoms begin to fade. The headache softens, the nerves steady, and you find yourself wondering if maybe, just maybe, a tiny dose of soothing elixir would take the edge off. The pharmacy is conveniently located after all, and the pharmacist greets you by name and by your most recent ailment. You make a show of resisting. You browse the herbal teas, sniff the lavender sachets, and pretend to contemplate mineral water. 5 minutes later, you leave with a fresh bottle, a smile, and a promise to take it only as needed, which, in Paris, is any time before, during, or after a hangover. Meanwhile, the city shakes itself awake. Painters return to their canvases, writers to their cafés, and the flaneurs begin their daily drift. The jazz musicians, somehow, are already rehearsing. Housewives trade hangover cures over garden fences. Waiters recommend hair of the dog cocktails, and the entire city agrees not to talk too loudly until after lunch. By evening, you're back to yourself, bright-eyed, bushy, tailed, and ready to swear off clean living until tomorrow. After all, what's Paris without a little excess? A city in recovery is just a city waiting for the next adventure. Because in 1920s Paris, The hangover is never the end of the story. It's just an intermission, right before the next act begins. Parisian nights are alive with the click of heels, the laughter of jazz clubs, and the occasional police officer trying very hard to look the other way. You're not sure if you're out for a stroll or just trying to remember where you live. Either way, it's safer not to ask. Let's set the scene. Midnight in Montmartre. The streetlights flicker, the cafés hum with after-hours debates, and somewhere, a distant saxophone echoes off the cobblestones. You step out of the jazz club, a little dizzy, scarf askew, feeling both glamorous and slightly confused. The air smells like cigarettes, spilled wine, and a dash of mischief. All around, Paris is wide awake, though not always for the right reasons. On the boulevard, the gendarmes are on patrol. They walk in pairs, uniforms crisp, moustaches even crisper. Officially, they're keeping the peace. Unofficially, they're masters of selective blindness, especially when it comes to the peculiar energy radiating from the local pharmacy's regulars. The gendarmes know better than to ask what's in your flask, or why that artist is trying to pay for his taxi with a poem. If you look harmless enough, and in Paris, that just means you're not carrying a trumpet at 2 a.m, they'll tip their hats and move along. The real action, though, is on the edges. In shadowy alleyways, smoky basement clubs, and all-night bakeries where the clientele is equal parts bohemian and bewildered. Here, you find the night shift, the silent army of waiters, bakers, cab drivers, and assorted insomniacs who keep Paris ticking. The baker's oven glows, filling the street with the scent of fresh bread. The flower seller yawns on a corner, her bucket of wilting roses a quiet testimony to long hours and longer nights. And then, of course, there are the true creatures of the night. The jazz musicians winding down from their sets, their laughter a little too loud, their hands still twitching with rhythm. The addicts, both discreet and spectacular, drifting from one pharmacy to another with the shameless optimism of people who've discovered life's easier with a little chemical assistance. And the professional eccentrics, writers reciting poems to stray cats, actors performing impromptu soliloquies for taxi drivers, and the occasional Englishman loudly insisting that Paris has no closing hours. Every corner holds a story. A painter staggers out of a bistro, trailed by admirers and the ghost of an unfinished masterpiece. A couple argues about philosophy under a street lamp, their quarrel punctuated by kisses and dramatic sighs. A gendarme pauses to light a cigarette, watching the world with the weary amusement of a man who's seen it all and plans to see even more before breakfast. The city's rhythms are different at night, looser, stranger, a little less concerned with consequence. Shopkeepers serve midnight specials with a wink. Cab drivers know every shortcut and secret, and if you end up lost, you'll always find company, or at least a good story, before you find your front door. The usual rules don't apply. After midnight, Paris is a city of improvisation. If you can't remember why you're out, the city will find a reason for you. By dawn, the streets empty out, swept clean for the next round of adventure. You stumble home, shoes dusty, heart light, pockets mysteriously full of receipts and half-baked ideas. The sun rises, the city resets, and the gendarmes start their rounds anew, ready to pretend, once again, that they've seen nothing at all. Because in Paris, street life is half performance, half confession, and always just a little bit magical. Artists and writers aren't just using heroin for fun, they're using it for greatness. The newspapers call it inspiration, the neighbors call it a public health crisis, you call it Thursday. Let's set the scene. It's a moody Paris afternoon, and you're squeezed into a tiny attic studio, somewhere between Montparnasse and a daydream. Light slants in through a dusty skylight, illuminating a tangle of empty bottles, cigarette stubs, and notebooks filled with world-changing ideas and questionable doodles. Your neighbor is a painter who claims to have invented a new color by accident, and across the hall, a writer's been up for 3 days, convinced his typewriter is channeling ancient Greek ghosts. The air is thick with ambition, desperation, and the faint but unmistakable perfume of artistic remedy. This is Paris in the 20s, the world's most competitive, open-mic night, where everyone is convinced they're on the edge of brilliance or disaster, and sometimes both, within the same hour. The cult of genius is alive and well, fueled by late-night arguments, endless cafe tabs, and, more often than not, a trip to the pharmacy. If you want to be a legend, you'll need more than just talent. You'll need assistance. For the true bohemian, a prescription isn't a luxury. It's a tool. Heroin isn't just something to take, it's something to talk about. Your favorite poet claims it helps him see the hidden patterns of the universe. The playwright says it makes the dialogue flow like water over marble. Even the musicians swear by a pinch of this or a drop of that before every show. Parisian pharmacies, ever obliging, stock their shelves with creative stimulants, philosophers' drops, and melancholy powders guaranteed to deliver at least one truly wild idea before breakfast. Of course, the neighbors are starting to notice. Was that Picasso I saw sleepwalking through the courtyard at noon? Why is that novelist screaming at a typewriter in 3 languages? Did someone just attempt to paint the moon with cough syrup? The city's landlords develop a new tolerance for eccentricity and a new policy on rent being paid in abstract value. But for every dazzling work of genius, there's a price. The hangover from inspiration is brutal, and the come down from a night of enhanced creativity can leave even the bravest soul staring at a blank canvas or empty page, nerves jangling, ambition curdled into regret. Some artists swear off the stuff, at least until the next dry spell, the next deadline, the next party. Paris is forgiving, but memory is short, and soon the cycle starts again. Inspiration, excess, collapse, repeat. The newspapers try to keep up. One day, they print glowing reviews of the latest surrealist sensation, a painting that challenges the very notion of reality and also, apparently, gravity. The next day, they run nervous columns about the city's new addiction epidemic, full of warnings, finger-wagging, and ads for gentler remedies. The artists, of course, read it all over coffee and a dash of something stronger, then go back to rewriting the rules of the universe. You watch as your circle of friends fluctuates wildly between triumph and tragedy. One week, someone is celebrated as the next great hope of French letters. The next, they're sleeping through appointments and missing dinner for reasons nobody bothers to ask about anymore. You wonder, sometimes, what Paris would look like without all this chemical courage. Quieter, maybe. Less dazzling. But also, perhaps, less heartbreakingly, hilariously human. And so you write, you paint, you perform, sometimes in spite of the curse, sometimes because of it, because in 1920s Paris, genius is just a party trick away from madness. And the city wouldn't have it any other way. After all, you tell yourself, it's only Thursday, the week's just getting started. Let's visit the traveling medicine men pitching heroin cures alongside snake oil and dubious lotions. For just a few francs, you too can experience modern science, and possibly the inside of a Parisian holding cell. Let's set the scene. The fairground in the shadow of Sacré-Cœur is alive with sound, accordion music, laughter, and the clatter of makeshift stages being set up on the boulevard. Crowds drift from one spectacle to the next. A woman swallowing swords, a man juggling flaming baguettes, and, drawn by the scent of promise and rubbing alcohol, a tent painted with grandiose letters, Dr. Miracle Son's Remedies for the Soul. You enter to find a room thick with anticipation and various legal grey areas. The good doctor, who looks suspiciously like your neighbour in a fake moustache, stands on a soapbox and extols the virtues of his latest concoction. Miracle Elixir, guaranteed to cure coughs, colds, heartache, and unsightly knees. He waves a bottle over his head, and the crowd leans in, hopeful, skeptical, or just in need of entertainment that won't ask them for an opinion on cubism. His assistants, who may or may not be related, weave through the crowd with trays of tiny bottles. Some are blue, some are green, all are unlabeled except for the comforting words, "Drink me, you'll feel better. One sip is all it takes. Your headache fades, your worries blur, and for a brief golden moment, you believe that maybe your career as a poet is about to take off after all." Of course, the ingredients are a trade secret, but if you guessed heroin, absinthe, and a pinch of ambition, you'd be close enough for Parisian government work. Meanwhile, in the back of the tent, another miracle cure is making the rounds. Dr. Morin's invigorating tonic, which promises to restore vitality, charm, and conversational stamina. It tastes like licorice and regret. The bravest souls go for the Parisian special, a drink that fizzes, glows in the dark, and is almost certainly illegal in 3 countries. By the time the second show rolls around, everyone's either feeling better, dancing in the aisle, or experiencing visions of Joan of Arc. The medicine show isn't just about remedies, it's about hope, spectacle, and a bit of the old Parisian magic. Every evening ends with a raffle, first prize, a year's supply of miracle elixir, second prize, a discreet visit from the city's most understanding pharmacist, and a warning to watch out for imitations, especially from the apothecary on Rue Mouffetard. The crowd disperses, some looking for the next adventure, others already feeling the need for a top-up at the nearest café. But not everyone is convinced. The local gendarmes, ever vigilant, hover just outside the tent, wondering aloud whether it's worth arresting the performers, or if it's better to wait and see who passes out first. You see a few familiar faces, your neighbor, your favorite jazz pianist, even the city's most notorious art critic, all nursing bottles of something invigorating, all happy to suspend disbelief for one more night. And you? You stumble out into the Paris night, pockets lighter, spirit higher, and unsure whether you've been cured, conned, or just caught up in the greatest show on earth. The fairground lights twinkle, the crowd sways, and the only thing stronger than the elixir is the sense that anything is possible in the city of light. After all, in Paris, a miracle cure is just another excuse for a good story, and maybe a little more absinthe, just to be sure. You're an American in Paris, and everything is delightful, confusing, and slightly out of focus. The city sparkles, the locals laugh, and you're not sure if you're supposed to tip your pharmacist. Let's set the scene. You've just arrived by train with a trunk full of sensible shoes, a guidebook, and the naive belief that high school French will save you. The city greets you with accordion music, perfume, and a subtle but persistent sense that everyone else knows the plot, and you're just here for the intermission. You check into your hotel, tiny room, spectacular view, suspiciously wobbly bed, and hit the boulevard, determined to do as the Parisians do, whatever that actually means. Your first stop, a café. You order in your best bonjour and receive a coffee, a croissant, and a look that says, "Nice try, rookie." At the next table, a pair of artists argue passionately about existentialism while drinking something the color of pond water. You ask for the same, and the waiter smiles a little too brightly. One sip later, you're no closer to understanding the conversation, but you do feel strangely optimistic about your own handwriting. You wander the city, dazzled and slightly lost. Paris is everything you hoped. grand boulevards, mysterious alleyways, and locals who seem to glide instead of walk. You try to blend in. You buy a hat that's a little too stylish, a scarf that's a little too long, and learn the hard way that Parisian sidewalks are an obstacle course of tiny dogs and philosophical detours. And then you meet the other American tourists. They cluster in packs, comparing currency, debating the best way to order steak, and loudly asking where the real Paris Island. Someone produces a list of must-see attractions. Another insists on trying the absinthe experience. And soon you're all marching off in search of the city's best cultural adventure. Translation: you end up at a jazz club where the drinks are strong, the music is louder, and the bartender's house special leaves you speaking fluent gibberish. The next morning, you wake up to find a map scrawled with unintelligible notes, a ticket stub from a museum you don't remember entering, and the kind of hangover that feels like a diplomatic incident. The hotel maid is unimpressed by your attempts at French. Your pharmacist, because you now have one, offers you a tonic for nerves and a wink that says, "Bienvenue à Paris, you're one of us now." Parisian pharmacies are an adventure in themselves. The labels are mysterious, the advice is enthusiastic, and the American tendency to ask for non-drowsy options is met with gentle laughter. Soon you discover that everyone has a remedy for something. Jet lag, heartbreak, the sniffles, or the existential terror that sets in halfway through a long museum queue. You start collecting bottles as souvenirs because nothing says authentic experience like digestive mystère from the Marais. Of course, being an American in Paris isn't just about confusion and questionable drinks. It's about discovery. The joy of wandering the city at midnight, the shock of realizing you actually like stinky cheese, the comfort of knowing that at any moment you can find another tourist, equally bewildered, trying to figure out how to use a Parisian payphone. Together, you form a little club of outsiders, swapping tips and stories over yet another round of Café Noisette. And if you do get lost, geographically or philosophically, don't worry. That's part of the plan. Paris is the kind of city that forgives wanderers, welcomes the confused, and always provides a new prescription if you ask nicely. You may not learn to blend in, but you'll learn to belong. Because in Paris, everyone's a tourist at heart, just some are better at faking it than others. Beneath the city's glitter is a world of shadowy deals, mysterious clubs, and the kind of parties that require a password, a strong constitution, and occasionally a lawyer. Let's set the scene. Midnight has come and gone, but Paris is just waking up beneath the surface. You slip through an alley off the Boulevard de Clichy, guided by the flicker of neon and the memory of a rumor. There's no sign above the door, just a faint symbol chalked onto the bricks and a doorman who asks if you know the phrase. You mumble something that sounds philosophical, possibly a pastry. He grins, swings open the door, and you're inside. This is the Parisian underground, a place where the city's misfits, musicians, and mavericks come to breathe. The music is louder, the rules looser, and the drinks twice as mysterious as anywhere above ground. Jazz bands play deep into the night, switching instruments between sets, as if the whole affair is a rehearsal for a revolution nobody plans to schedule. The saxophone wails, the bass thumps, and somewhere in the back, someone is trying to organize a chess match with only 3 pieces and a lot of enthusiasm. At the bar, artists swap sketches for cocktails, poets recite verses for a cigarette and a secret. A couple of philosophers are arguing over who gets the last absinthe, while a gangster's mole plays cards with a priest who claims he's off duty. This is a Paris that never makes the postcards, where the air smells of perfume, gunpowder, and a hint of regret. The waiters glide through the chaos, pouring drinks that taste like daring and drop hints about the next big thing. If you can remember the password, deal-making is everywhere. In one corner, a famous chanteuse trades a handful of laudanum pills for a rare American record. In another, a painter and a pickpocket negotiate over who gets the last slice of lemon tart. Sometimes the police drop by, not to break up the party, but to remind everyone that discretion is the only rule. As long as the bribes are generous and the neighbors don't complain, what happens in the underground stays beneath Paris. For those who seek more than just music, there's a second layer, a back room behind the back room. Here, the city's brightest minds and darkest hearts plot art movements, political schemes, and the next big scandal. Surrealists hatch manifestos. Revolutionaries toast to utopias that last exactly as long as the cognac does. The atmosphere buzzes with invention, improvisation, and the occasional threat of arrest. Of course, not everyone comes here by choice. For some, the underground is an escape. From daylight, from decorum, from the expectations of polite society. Here, you can wear what you want, say what you like, and reinvent yourself every night. If you need a lawyer, there's always one playing piano in the corner, specializing in both jazz chords and legal loopholes. As the night slips toward morning, the crowd thins, but the energy lingers. Stragglers stagger into the dawn, pockets full of IOUs, business cards, and poetry scrawled on napkins. The city above wakes up none the wiser. Streets swept clean. Secrets locked away until the next midnight. And you? You stumble home, pulse still pounding to the jazz beat, the taste of secrets on your tongue, and the knowledge that you've glimpsed the true heart of Paris, a place where anything goes, as long as you know the right people and the right password. Because in the Parisian underground, every rule is an invitation. Every night is an experiment. And everyone, just for a few hours, gets to be part of the city's greatest conspiracy. Everyone has a day job: secretary, artist, taxi driver, or professional eccentric. The real skill is balancing the glamour with the exhaustion and remembering to actually show up to something. Sometime, somewhere. Let's set the scene. It's Monday morning, and Paris is waking up with the kind of reluctance normally reserved for dental appointments and tax season. Your shoes are by the bed, mostly. Your head is foggy. There's a ticket stub in your pocket from a jazz club you only vaguely remember, and a note scrawled on your hand that says, "Don't forget your hat." Again, you're not sure if you wrote it or if someone else did as a public service. Being a Parisian in the 1920s is a delicate art. By night, you're a dancer, a philosopher, a fixture at every cafe, party, and impromptu street performance. By day, you're supposed to have a respectable occupation, or at least a plausible explanation for your existence. Your boss expects punctuality. Your landlord expects rent. Your body expects sleep. Only one of these will actually happen. You stumble to the kitchen for coffee strong enough to stand up on its own. The clock glares at you. There's a to-do list on the table, and it's mostly just the word "breathe" written 10 times. Outside, the city yawns and stretches, taxis honk, bakers toss flour into the air, and newspaper boys yell headlines about scandals you were probably involved in. Parisian workplaces are a study in contradiction. The secretaries swap lipstick tips and stories from last night's party. The artists arrive, still wearing their pajamas and a dusting of glitter, and the bankers practice their "I definitely didn't spend my weekend at a poetry slam" faces. Your boss, suspiciously cheerful for someone awake before noon, gives you a knowing look and a cup of herbal tea labeled courage. The unspoken rule: as long as you show up, you're golden. Just don't fall asleep in the filing cabinet. Of course, being Parisian isn't just about survival, it's about style. You straighten your scarf, run a comb through your hair, and try to look like you meant to wear mismatched shoes. At lunch, everyone rehashes the weekend's adventures, careful to omit anything that might be illegal, immoral, or involve the pharmacist's private blend. The city runs on gossip, strong coffee, and a shared agreement not to ask too many questions. And then, by late afternoon, something magical happens. You remember that you love this city, hangover and all. Maybe it's the sunlight on the river, maybe it's the bakery's second batch of croissants, or maybe it's just the fact that everyone else is pretending to have it together, too. You share a smile with a stranger, help a lost tourist find the metro, and tell yourself that tomorrow you'll go to bed before midnight. You won't. By evening, the city is revving up again. Jazz clubs flicker to life, restaurants fill with laughter, and you find yourself making plans you know you can't keep. The cycle continues. Work, party, recover, repeat. You promise yourself you'll be more responsible. Just as soon as you finish this glass of wine and that conversation with a poet about the meaning of Mondays. Because in Paris, showing up is half the battle. The other half is doing it with enough style that nobody notices you're running on charm, caffeine, and a very flexible definition of Monday morning. Congratulations, you're officially Parisian, or at least you're doing a very convincing impression. By the end of the decade, the city starts to wake up. Doctors panic, newspapers gasp, and the government tries to invent rehab. But for every new law, there's a party in someone's apartment, and a very persuasive pharmacist. Let's set the scene. It's 1929, and Paris, usually a city allergic to moderation, has started to notice that everyone's a bit twitchier than usual. The jazz is still hot, but now the bass player is missing. The saxophonist hasn't blinked in 3 days, and the waiters are circulating rumors along with the wine. It's as if the city woke up after a wild night, checked its reflection in the Seine, and collectively whispered, "Oh dear." Headlines scream from every newsstand. Heroin menace sweeps the boulevards. City of Light goes dark. Suddenly, everyone's an expert in addiction. Politicians denounce the scourge, while quietly reminding voters of their cousin's apothecary business. Police launch high-profile raids that mostly catch sleep-deprived poets and one elderly woman knitting in the wrong place at the wrong time. The real dealers, meanwhile, slip out the back, exchanging recipes for herbal tea, and giggling all the way to the next party. Doctors, sensing a change in the wind, and perhaps in their supply chain, switch tactics. Where once they prescribed heroin for every ache, pain, and poetic crisis, they now favor rest cures, spa retreats, and scandal of scandals, actual advice to drink water and go for walks. The pharmacies, never ones to let a good panic go to waste, double down on branding. Heroin is rebranded as serious medicine, kept behind the counter, and, if you're in the know, under the counter as well. Demand doesn't disappear. It just becomes more discreet. The government, always eager to appear both shocked and in control, calls for a series of emergency meetings. Committees are formed, reports are written, and the first rehabilitation center opens in a borrowed monastery. The center's main activities are knitting, prayer, and a lot of very weak tea. The official slogan, "Clean living for a brighter Paris." The unofficial slogan, "Please don't embarrass us in front of the Americans." Meanwhile, the newspapers can't get enough. Editorials debate the role of jazz, the moral collapse of youth, and whether modern dancing is to blame. Sensational stories emerge. Tales of artists who painted entire apartments while under the influence. Of writers who forgot their own names but remembered their dealer's phone number. Cartoons appear of dazed Parisians staggering past the Eiffel Tower, clutching prescriptions like lost love letters. But for every crackdown, there's a clever workaround. Parties go private, bottles get relabeled, and the city's infamous creativity turns toward inventing new euphemisms for pharmaceutical fun. Taking the waters now means something entirely different. Cafe menus quietly offer special blends. The city, ever adaptable, invents plausible deniability, and calls it a trend. Yet beneath the jokes, something is shifting. The hangovers last longer, the recovery's slower. Friends start whispering about taking a break or moving to the countryside for their nerves. Some actually do. Others don't. The city begins to miss the innocent chaos of earlier days when the stuff felt like progress, not a problem. But nostalgia is a powerful drug too. And by the time the decade closes, Paris is ready, sort of, to move on. So the next time someone offers you a harmless pick-me-up, you remember. Paris tried moderation, and for a moment, almost liked it. But just in case, you keep your pharmacist's card handy. Because in this city, recovery is just another phase in the endless dance of excess, regret, and reinvention. And the party, of course, is never really over. Children grow up playing in courtyards, learning to ride bikes, and occasionally wondering why everyone seems so relaxed at family dinners. At least the cat is finally sleeping through the night. Let's set the scene. It's Sunday afternoon, and the apartment is full of the sounds of a Parisian family in action. Children chase each other through rooms, dodging the legs of grandparents who are nodding off in the armchairs. The scent of freshly baked bread mingles with the less recognizable aroma drifting out of the kitchen, herbs, spices, and somewhere in there, a dash of nervous tonic added to the stew just in case. Every cupboard is a pharmacy, and every family member has their favorite remedy. The breakfast table is a pharmacy counter in disguise. The adults sip their digestive, the teenagers sneak a taste of wine. And even the youngest get a spoonful of soothing syrup when teething or asking too many questions. Conversations are leisurely, eyes are heavy-lidded. And the cat, once a creature of midnight chaos, has adopted a lifestyle of deep, contemplative naps. You suspect he's been into the valerian drops, but don't mistake the tranquility for boredom. Parisian family life is a raucous, loving affair, full of arguments about politics, jazz, and whether grandma's cough syrup actually contains any medicine at all. Relatives drop by unannounced, bearing baguettes and unsolicited opinions. Children learn early how to slip from room to room, avoiding both adult interrogations and the bottle labeled for nerves. It's a generational handoff. The same pharmacist who dispensed remedies for your mother now winks at you and tucks an extra bottle of house blend into your basket. Great-grandfather still swears by a concoction invented during the Franco-Prussian War. And Aunt Claudette claims her beauty comes from herbal teas with a secret ingredient nobody will name. Family recipes include instructions for both soufflé and self-medication, sometimes on the same card. And, of course, the family stories. Remember the time Uncle Henri thought the cat was a ghost? Remember when Papa slept through Bastille Day? Children grow up hearing tales of relatives who made it through wars, heartbreak, and the blackout of 1919. Always with the help of a good pharmacy and a questionable elixir. The lesson is clear. Whatever life throws at you, there's a bottle for that. The pharmacy, in this world, is more than a shop. It's a trusted confidant. Birthdays, weddings, christenings. There's always a bottle wrapped up alongside the presents. Children are sent on errands for bread and come back with both the loaf and the new restorative for grandma's tired afternoons. Family doctors double as family friends, offering advice on everything from measles to existential crises. By evening, the family gathers for dinner, long, noisy, and filled with laughter. Someone proposes a toast, someone else suggests another digestive, and everyone agrees that a little something after the meal helps with digestion, nerves, and the inevitable family sing-along. Children drift off to bed, lulled by lullabies and a faint, persistent drowsiness. Adults debate whether to try that new herbal infusion the neighbor recommended. The cat, still napping, misses the entire conversation. Generations come and go, but some things never change. The comfort of family, the importance of routine, and the knowledge that in Paris, every problem, big or small, real or imagined, can be solved or at least postponed with the right combination of laughter, love, and a discreet dash of something medicinal. So if you ever find yourself at a Parisian family dinner, don't ask too many questions about what's in your glass. Just raise it, toast to tradition, and enjoy the moment. Because in Paris, even the family cat knows relaxation is a family value. Not every morning is golden. Paris learns the hard way that glamour has a cost. There's heartbreak, struggle, and the realization that sometimes you really do have to face reality. Eventually, let's set the scene. It's early, but the city is already awake. The cafés open their doors a little slower, and the streets seem quieter, as if Paris itself is tiptoeing around a collective headache. The sparkle from last night's party has faded. The shine of the city of light is replaced by the dull glow of 1,000 tired eyes. For once, the aroma wafting from the bakery is stronger than the energy in the crowd. You drag yourself to a table, order the strongest coffee on the menu, and try not to look directly at the sunlight. This is the morning after. The part nobody wants to paint, sing, or write poems about. The jazz clubs are shuttered, the medicine cabinets are mysteriously empty, and everyone seems to be coming down from something. The conversation is more honest. Instead of philosophy and flirtation, you hear soft confessions about insomnia, lost friendships, or the creeping dread of another bill from the pharmacy. Last night's bold declarations have turned into whispered promises to take a break or try herbal tea, just this once. The city feels different in withdrawal. The painters don't finish their canvases, the writers can't find the words, and even the flâneurs seem to be wandering in circles, looking for something they can't name. The music is slower, the laughter quieter. Your best friend spends the afternoon rearranging bookshelves instead of reciting poetry. Your favorite barista asks if you'd like a glass of water with a look of concern you haven't seen since last winter's flu. It's not just you. Across Paris, withdrawal is the secret second life of the party. Behind closed doors, people try to sleep, sweat, and sigh their way through another clean day. Some seek comfort in endless cups of chicory coffee. Others in walks along the Seine, hoping the river will carry away their regrets. There's an unspoken solidarity, a nod between strangers who both know how hard it is to start over again. Doctors, once so eager to prescribe solutions, now suggest rest, time, and patience, my dear. Pharmacies quietly remove certain bottles from the window displays, replacing them with chamomile tea and vitamin tonics. Magazines run articles on mindfulness and the healing power of fresh air, as if a picnic could erase a decade of Parisian excess. Still, some old habits die hard. The city's jazz musicians, undaunted, play slow blues in empty clubs, finding comfort in every minor chord. But withdrawal is not just about loss. It's also about rediscovery. The taste of fresh bread, the feel of sunlight on your face, the joy of waking up with a clear mind, even if you're a little sad, a little tired, a little nostalgic for the old chaos. You realize that the city is still beautiful, still alive, even when it isn't spinning at full tilt. You find new friends or reconnect with old ones over long walks and quiet evenings. Paris is still Paris, just quieter, gentler, more real. As the days go by, the colors return. People linger in parks, paint again, write again, and dance. Slowly, at first, then with more confidence. The city remembers how to shine without artificial help, and so do you. Because in the end, withdrawal is just another chapter in the Parisian story, a pause before the next wild verse, a quiet interlude that makes the music all the sweeter when it starts again. Prohibition creeps across the Atlantic, scandals rock the city, and suddenly, everyone's forced to switch to black coffee and awkward conversation. The party isn't quite over, but it's definitely quieter. Let's set the scene. It's 1930, and Paris is waking up to a new reality. One with a little less sparkle and a lot more scrutiny. The newspapers shout headlines about moral renewal, the dangers of foreign substances, and, most chillingly, new regulations. America has sent over more than just jazz and jazz musicians this time. It's sent prohibition, complete with visiting experts in dry living and lectures on self-restraint that leave Parisians blinking in disbelief. The government, not wanting to be outdone, launches a series of investigations, committees, and stern warnings that fall somewhere between official policy and suggestion. At first, nobody takes it seriously. Paris, after all, is the city that survived wars, revolutions, and 1,000 disastrous hats. But then, the police get serious. Pharmacies are raided, jazz clubs are monitored, and the new morality squads start making rounds after midnight. The word on the street is, keep your head down, your bottles hidden, and your stories straight. Suddenly, that innocent bottle of cough syrup looks as suspicious as a suitcase full of francs. Society is in a tizzy. Hostesses fret over guest lists. Artists whisper about who's been compromised or gone clean. The city's most notorious poet is seen drinking actual chamomile tea. And the bakery runs out of chocolate eclairs because everyone is stress-eating. The parties, when they do happen, are smaller, quieter, and always have an escape plan. Passwords get longer. Dress codes get stricter. Even the cat starts looking over its shoulder. But if you know Paris, you know it never gives up on a good party, just adapts. The underground scene blossoms again, this time with more code words and a lot of black coffee served in suspiciously heavy mugs. A book club meets in the back of a flower shop. A baking society gathers in a borrowed cellar. If you're clever and still know the right people, you can find champagne behind a curtain and a little digestif in a teapot labelled "for plants only." Parisians were never good at following rules, but they are excellent at pretending to. Scandal, of course, is everywhere. Every week, a new exposé hits the papers. A famous actress caught at a medicinal supper. A politician with suspiciously glazed eyes at a gallery opening. A pharmacist who's suddenly taken up stamp collecting in Zurich. Everyone has an opinion, but nobody has a solution. The old days are toasted with bittersweet jokes, whispered regrets, and the occasional clandestine glass of something stronger than seltzer. For many, the real heartbreak isn't the crackdown. It's the end of the era's peculiar freedom. The city feels a little more grown up, a little less careless. Old friends drift away, some to the countryside, some to new obsessions, some just to bed before midnight for the first time in years. The jazz is still there, but it's softer now. The lights are still bright, but the nights end earlier. Paris, for all its stubbornness, can't escape change forever. But you know what? Even as the music fades and the parties shrink, the spirit lingers. The city finds new ways to celebrate, smaller, subtler, but no less alive. Paris learns to live with itself, even when it can't dance until dawn. And if you ever find yourself nostalgic for the wild old days, just listen carefully. Somewhere, in a back room, someone's still playing jazz, telling stories, and raising a glass to everything Paris used to be, and everything it still is, underneath the new respectability. Because the last party is never really the last, not in Paris. Years later, Paris is still Paris, timeless, beautiful, and a little bit haunted by its wildest decade. The art lives on, the music still plays, and the city remains proof that people will try anything in the name of genius. Let's set the scene. It's the 1940s, and Paris is once again reinventing itself. The war has come and gone, but the city's memory is long and oddly selective. The grand boulevards shine as always, the cafés are still full of dreamers, and somewhere, tucked between faded posters and jazz records, are echoes of that glorious, delirious decade when Paris ran on more than just caffeine. The heroin years aren't talked about much in polite society, but behind every toast, every inside joke, every painting hung a little crooked, you can sense the aftershocks of a time when moderation was just a rumor. What survived? The art. Above all, the paintings that scandalized the critics, the novels written in a blur of inspiration and insomnia, the music that could wake the dead or lull you to sleep, these remain. They hang in galleries, gather dust on shelves, and fill the air of smoky basements, turned jazz bars. The spirit of the city, untamed and unashamed, lingers in every crooked smile, and every risk-taker who still thinks a cure for heartbreak is best chased with a little something extra. But not everything made it through unscathed. Some friendships faded, lost to distance, disappointment, or just too many nights spent chasing oblivion. Some artists never finished their masterpieces, some never started. The pharmacies, once the pulsing heart of Parisian nightlife, have gone respectable, or at least respectable enough to keep the authorities guessing. The party that never ended finally did, leaving behind an entire generation of stories, both brilliant and tragic. Paris remembers, though. The next wave of bohemians arrives, drawn by stories half-whispered over late-night wine and the irresistible promise that here, anything is possible. They inherit a city that has learned, however reluctantly, that even magic comes with a morning after. New scandals bloom where the old ones fade. The police raid jazz clubs, then later attend them. The city's capacity for reinvention, for forgetting just enough to keep living boldly, is what keeps Paris alive long after the pharmacy shelves have been cleared and the last digestive has been poured down the drain. Tourists wander the boulevards, marveling at the sights, unaware that they're walking over the footprints of writers who changed the world and dancers who barely remembered it the next morning. Locals tell stories, some true, some wildly improved, about the days when anything could be fixed with a poem, a prescription, or both. Even the cats look a little wiser, as if they too remember a time when the streets buzzed with more than just traffic. But the real legacy of Paris in the age of heroin isn't found in museums or archives. It's in the way the city still inspires mischief, still tolerates eccentricity, still welcomes dreamers from every corner of the globe. It's in the unspoken agreement that life should be lived beautifully, even if it isn't always lived sensibly. The city is softer now, perhaps, but not tamed. A little sadder, perhaps, but never dull. So if you ever sit in a Paris café, lost in your own thoughts, listening to the faint echo of jazz, or the distant sound of a poet reading aloud, remember, the wildest decade in Parisian history may be over, but its spirit still lingers, waiting for the next person bold or foolish enough to chase it. Because in Paris, everything old is new again, and the next adventure is just one toast away. Parenting in 1920s Paris is a lot like today, exhausting, confusing, and full of unsolicited advice from relatives who somehow never help. Only here, if your toddler won't sleep, Grandma just suggests a medicinal drop from that mysterious brown bottle in the cabinet. The result? Parisian children are either world-class nappers or have seen the wallpaper move, and you're not sure which is worse. Let's set the scene. It's a foggy Tuesday morning, and you're running on 3 hours of sleep, 2 cups of café au lait, and the vague hope that your offspring will, at some point, discover the joys of napping. The baby's gums are swollen, The toddler is staging a small revolution with a wooden spoon and a choir of increasingly desperate wails. Enter Grandma, with her eternal wisdom, starched apron, and an expression that says, "I raised 8 and look, none of them are in prison yet." She heads straight for the medicine cabinet, ignoring your protests about modern methods and doctor's advice. With the ceremony of a priest performing a sacrament, she pours exactly 1 drop of a dark, viscous liquid onto a sugar cube and hands it to your teething little angel. Within minutes, the baby is drifting off. The toddler is mumbling dreamily about flying elephants, and you are left in the unaccustomed silence of a Parisian apartment with sleeping children and a mild sense of unease. Parenting here isn't about perfect routines or organic snacks. It's about survival and a well-stocked cupboard. The city's pharmacies do a roaring trade in all manner of infant pacifiers, soothing syrups, and nighttime remedies. The ingredients list is long on promises and short on specifics, though words like opium tincture, chloroform, and a hint of honey appear with worrying regularity. Ask the pharmacist if it's safe, and he'll just shrug, wink, and remind you that Parisian children have survived revolutions, sieges, and the invention of jazz. Your friends swap stories at the playground, which is less child development zone and more parental support group with extra swings. There's always one mother who insists on herbal teas. Her children are wide-eyed and suspiciously energetic. Another who recommends fresh air and vinegar compresses, and everyone else who quietly admits to slipping a little something into the evening bottle just on difficult nights. Parenting magazines run helpful articles like "How to Get Your Child to Sleep Past Sunrise" and "The Art of the 3 p.m. Nap" for parents, not children. None of the advice works, but everyone feels better after discussing it over pastries. The truth is, Parisian children of the era are remarkably adaptable. They grow up in a world of bustling markets, smoky cafés, and parents who have mastered the art of the nap with one eye open. Their lullabies are jazz solos. Their bedtime stories often end with, "And then we all fell asleep, thank heavens." If your toddler sleepwalks, it's chalked up to creative energy. If your baby snores, it's probably the syrup or the family's infamous approach to bedtime. Of course, there are mishaps. Sometimes the dose is too much, and the child sleeps through a thunderstorm, a visit from the landlord, and 3 meals. Other times, not enough, and the household is treated to a midnight serenade of epic tantrums. You learn to find humor in the chaos, camaraderie in the struggle, and comfort in the knowledge that every Parisian parent is just as tired and just as inventive as you are. And as the children nap, you finally pour yourself a cup of coffee, savoring the peace and the peculiar joy of knowing that, in Paris, even parenting comes with a dash of drama, a sprinkle of rebellion, and, if all else fails, a bottle in the cupboard, just out of reach. Eventually, even the most committed partygoers need a break. Enter the Parisian detox retreat, 3 days of vegetable broth, cold towels, and promises to never touch the stuff again. You emerge cleansed, reborn, and already dreaming about next weekend's jazz soiree. Spoiler: no one ever makes it past day 4. Let's set the scene. It's the morning after a legendary soiree, and the city is groaning in unison. Your head feels stuffed with cobblestones, your limbs are leaden, and your heart swears you'll live a cleaner life, or at least survive until Wednesday. Around Paris, a new trend is sweeping the city: the detox retreat. These aren't fancy spas or sun-drenched villas. No, in Paris, a detox is something you do at home, in a darkened room with wilted lettuce, an old family recipe for clarifying broth, and a collection of regrets as long as the Seine. The first step is always denial. "I don't need a detox," you mutter, staring longingly at the cafe across the street. But your friends are determined. "Just 3 days. they plead, armed with celery sticks and pious intentions. You agree, because you're too tired to argue, and because the idea of not seeing the inside of a pharmacy for a week actually sounds novel. Day one is all optimism and herbal tea. You tell yourself you're reclaiming your health, your creativity, and possibly your ability to feel your toes. You sip broth, wrap yourself in a cold towel, and try to meditate. But your mind drifts to memories of champagne toasts and late-night eclairs. Your friends form a support group in your parlor, swapping tales of the wildest nights and most regrettable prescriptions. This time, you promise, we're done. By day two, reality sets in. The city is alive, jazz floats in from somewhere far too close, and your neighbor is having a small gathering that sounds suspiciously like a full orchestra. The broth is bland, your resolve is shaky, and someone discovers a bottle of medicinal wine behind the flower jar. Arguments break out. Is a little wine part of the detox? What about wine in soup? The lines blur quickly. Someone claims that dancing is a form of cleansing, so you all shuffle around the living room in your dressing gowns, pretending it's exercise. Detoxing, Parisian style, isn't just about abstaining, it's a performance. You send postcards to friends, describing your heroic sacrifice. You make dramatic declarations about turning over a new leaf, preferably with cream sauce. The maid, unconvinced, places a bowl of fruit on the table and quietly removes all glassware. You start to envy the family cat, who sleeps through it all and seems blissfully unaffected by existential crises or celery. By day three, the group's enthusiasm is a distant memory. Everyone is grumpy, daydreaming of pastries, and slightly delirious from too much herbal tea. You consider sneaking to the corner bakery, but settle for sniffing a baguette and sighing dramatically. Your best friend insists that you're glowing with health, but you suspect it's just the fever from broth withdrawal. Then, as if by miracle, the detox ends. There's a sense of accomplishment, a twinge of pride, and an overwhelming urge to return to real life. And by real life, you mean the pharmacy, the jazz club, and the nearest chocolatier. You emerge from your 3-day retreat with big plans to live sensibly at least until the weekend. Because in Paris, detoxing isn't about giving up the good life. It's about pausing just long enough to appreciate how much you love it and how little you're willing to change. After all, moderation is admirable, but indulgence is far more fun. And besides, there's another soirée this Saturday. Wouldn't want to show up underdressed, underrested, or, worst of all, underprepared. If you think the parties are wild, wait until you stumble into a real Parisian club. No sign, no address, just a knock and a password. Inside, poets share visions, musicians improvise with 4 hands, and someone's always reading a banned book out loud. It's half literary salon, half fever dream with snacks. Let's set the scene. It's midnight in Montparnasse, and the fog is thick enough to hide just about anything, including the narrow door at the end of the alley. You've been invited, by whom, you're not sure, but the note was scented with lilac and promise. You knock. A peephole slides open, someone asks for the word, and you, not entirely confident, whisper, "Absinthe." The door swings wide. You step inside, and the world shifts. The air is warm, sweet, and humming with secrets. The club is a labyrinth of velvet couches, gilded mirrors, and lamps stained the color of sunsets. Everyone looks slightly familiar and slightly off-kilter, as if they're all playing a role in a play where the script changes every hour. A jazz trio in the corner improvises with instruments you're not sure even exist. Someone hands you a glass of something smoky and herbal, and you immediately forget half your worries and most of your French. This isn't just a party, It's an initiation. Each room has its own rituals. In the library, a woman with eyes like rain reads aloud from a banned Russian novel, while a group of artists debate whether dreams are art or just unpaid therapy. In the salon, a musician plays two pianos at once, both out of tune and perfectly synchronized. On the terrace, philosophers discuss the existence of God, the power of love, and the chances of getting more lemon tarts before dawn. And then there's the opium room. Cushions piled high, incense curling in the air, half a dozen poets reciting verse while their audience lounges in blissful indifference. No one is quite sure whose idea this was, but everyone agrees it was genius. The club's hostess floats through the rooms in a cloud of silk and laughter, occasionally pausing to whisper new passwords to the lucky or the lost. Every conversation ends with a toast to art, a salute to madness, or both. Joining a secret society in Paris isn't just about escapism, it's about belonging to something that feels eternal, conspiratorial, and just out of reach. You're not here for health or even happiness. You're here for experience, to hear the story that will never be printed, taste the drink that's never served in daylight, witness a performance that dissolves with the sunrise. Membership requires nothing but curiosity, a talent for creative storytelling, and the ability to keep a secret for at least a week. Of course, secrecy is half the fun. Passwords change nightly. The entrance is never in the same place twice. Sometimes the club is a bookshop, sometimes a bakery, sometimes the back room of a hat maker with a taste for Dada. If the police ever ask, you're just out for a walk. Maybe a bit lost, maybe a bit inspired, but certainly not in search of enlightenment and a complimentary biscuit. By dawn, the club empties out. The city wakes up none the wiser. You return to your everyday life with a new poem in your pocket, a new friend whose name you're not allowed to say, and the unshakable sense that you've seen Paris from the inside out, a city within a city, hidden in plain sight, where every door leads to another adventure. Because in Paris, the best stories are the ones you'll never be able to tell, and the best nights are always the ones spent just a little off the map. As the decade spins on, even the pharmacists start to wonder, should I maybe stop? One day, a famous author asks for a refill. The next, a woman wants to buy heroin for her nervous goldfish. The city's most respectable professionals begin to question if Paris is a city of dreams or just really creative excuses. Let's set the scene. You are standing in the doorway of Paris's oldest pharmacy, where the blue bottles glint like sapphires and the wooden counter is polished by decades of questionable decisions. The bell above the door jingles, and a parade of the city's finest characters parades in. An artist with paint in her hair, a society matron with a prescription that reads for general malaise, and, yes, a dachshund in a velvet collar, whose owner insists he's simply frazzled. The pharmacist, Monsieur Lefebvre, with a moustache as grand as his reputation, presides over it all with the weary grace of a man who's heard everything and believes only half of it. Once upon a time, his job was simple: weigh, mix, and measure. Now, he's part confidant, part therapist, part gatekeeper to a world where every problem seems to have a bottled solution. Nerves, monsieur? Certainly, madame. Lack of inspiration? Try the blue tonic. Can't sleep? We have something for that. And something to help you wake up after, too. But lately, even the city's most seasoned pill pusher is getting nervous. The requests are getting stranger. People want just a little something for creative block. They want the usual, but with a hint of adventure. One poet requests a prescription for existential despair, and Monsieur Lefebvre obliges, labeling it "Take two and write about your feelings." The line between medicine and mischief has never been thinner. The animal clientele is growing, too. dogs with insomnia, cats with melancholy, and once, memorably, a parrot who wouldn't stop reciting Voltaire. Each visit brings a new challenge. Should he fill this order? Is it ethical? Legal? How much laudanum does it take to calm a canary? And does the city inspector really need to know? At home, Monsieur Lefebvre confides in his wife over weak tea and strong doubts. "Do you think I'm enabling a citywide circus?" he asks. She shrugs, points out that Paris has always been a little bit circus, and suggests he keeps selling to the goldfish. At least they never complain about side effects. The pressure mounts. The government issues new guidelines, ignored. The newspapers run exposés, pharmacy or funhouse, and rival pharmacists compete to invent the most exciting tonic for modern nerves. Behind the scenes, rumors fly. Some pharmacists have gone underground, selling the good stuff from the back room to trusted customers. Others hang up their lab coats, exhausted, and open bakeries instead. Paris, after all, always needs more bread. Through it all, the city keeps spinning. The line at the pharmacy never gets shorter. The stories never get less strange. Monsieur Lefebvre learns to say no politely, but not always. He starts labeling the more dubious bottles for external use only, and keeps the truly wild requests under the counter, just in case a gendarme drops by looking for a pick-me-up for his cousin. As the decade ends, the pharmacist stands at his counter, weighing powder and possibility. Paris is a city of dreamers, schemers, and goldfish with a taste for the dramatic. Maybe, he thinks, the real cure for modern malaise isn't in a bottle, but in the stories that come with every strange request. Because in Paris, the pharmacy is more than a shop. It's the city's most reliable confessional. And some days, the only sane response to the madness is to pour another cup of tea, count the bottles, and hope the dachshund doesn't need a refill until next week. Every city needs a cure, and Paris is no exception. Enter a parade of wild remedies. Cabbage juice, electric baths, spiritual cleansing, and one particularly memorable scheme involving a therapy dog and a jazz quartet. Does any of it work? Absolutely not. But that never stopped anyone from trying, again and again and again. Let's set the scene. It's a Monday morning, and Paris is regretting every decision made since Saturday. You wake up with a mouth like a chalkboard, a head full of runaway accordions, and the sneaking suspicion that you're due at work, church, or possibly a group apology. The only thing more painful than the light streaming through the window is the sound of your neighbor enthusiastically reciting last night's party highlights. Naturally, the quest for a hangover cure becomes the city's unofficial hobby. Grandmothers pass down secret recipes that involve boiling cabbage, garlic, and something called determination. You choke it down, convinced that if it doesn't help, at least it will distract you from your suffering. The city's health columns offer their own advice. Take a cold shower, eat 3 croissants, and avoid all sudden movements for at least 12 hours. If you have the energy, you can visit a bathhouse for an electric cleanse, essentially sitting in a copper tub while a suspiciously cheerful attendant runs a mild current through the water. You emerge tingling, confused, and more or less convinced you'll never drink again. You will. Others turn to spiritual remedies. In Montmartre, a painter insists that lighting 3 candles and humming Debussy's Clair de Lune will realign your internal vibrations. Your friend hosts a cleansing circle where everyone writes their regrets on scraps of paper, burns them in an ashtray, and then immediately feels better, mostly because someone brings croissants. There are also those who swear by Paris's most trusted healers, the therapy animals. You see a poster for Biscuit the Hangover Hound, available for cuddles and existential support. Biscuit, a small dog in a velvet vest, comes to your flat, curls up on your chest, and sighs deeply while you recount your sins. He's booked solid through June, but the most Parisian solution is, of course, to try to outwit the hangover with sheer style. You gather with friends at the local café. Order an espresso so strong it could resurrect Victor Hugo, and swap stories. Someone will inevitably mention the hair of the dog, a splash of wine, a dash of cognac, a wink from the bartender who knows all your secrets. By noon, you've convinced yourself you're cured, or at least functional enough to return to the world of the living. For those with particularly stubborn headaches, the pharmacies are ready. There's a morning after tonic that tastes like sadness and black licorice, promising to restore vitality and moral clarity. Does it work? Not really, but it does give you an excuse to buy a croissant and skip anything remotely resembling responsibility until Tuesday. By the end of the day, the city is back on its feet, if a little wobbly. Jazz music drifts through open windows. Painters return to their canvases, writers to their notebooks, and the rest of Paris vows, one more time, to never overdo it again. It's a promise no one keeps, and no one expects you to, because in Paris, the hangover cure is less about actually curing anything and more about the shared ritual of trying. It's the city's way of saying, "We survived another night. Let's try for another." And if you find yourself back at the pharmacy, debating whether to buy the elixir of renewal or just a big bottle of water, remember, there's always another party on the horizon, and Paris will be waiting, slightly dazed but ready for whatever comes next. As we drift out of 1920s Paris, leaving behind the laughter, the smoke, and the suspiciously well-stocked pharmacies, let's take a quiet moment to reflect. Tonight you've wandered through jazz-soaked nights and sunlit boulevards, seen the city at its most glamorous and its most unhinged. You've survived parties where the guest list was half artists and half pharmacists, witnessed fashion statements involving more syringes than scents, and learned that sometimes the price of genius is a prescription you definitely shouldn't refill. It's easy to look back and laugh at Paris's legendary disasters. The artists too inspired for their own good. The doctors writing prescriptions like party invitations. The parties that started with jazz and ended with someone painting the wallpaper with existential angst. But underneath the chaos, there's a real story of people searching for meaning, beauty, and relief from the sharp edges of life. Of a city that became the stage for both spectacular creativity and some of the most spectacularly bad decisions history has to offer. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, maybe with a mug of herbal tea and a gratitude for modern medicine, spare a gentle thought for the Parisians of the past. For the dreamers who risked everything for a taste of something extraordinary, and for the ones who woke up in the morning a little bit worse for wear, but still willing to try again. Because history, for all its mess and misery, is also a testament to hope and to the truly remarkable ability of people to turn even disaster into something dazzling. Sleep easy knowing that your local pharmacy probably won't hand you a bottle labeled heroin for your next headache. And if you find yourself missing the glamour of 1920s Paris, just remember, sometimes the best adventures are the ones you get to leave behind when you turn out the light. Good night, dreamer. Paris awaits you in the morning, this time a little less dizzy.